I had an encounter many years ago that changed my perspective on UFOs and extraterrestrials. I was driving home from Chicago, and it was a warm summer night. I was in my Chevy LeBaron, and I had the top down, and I was with a buddy of mine. And we decided to take the back roads because it was more scenic. And as we were driving down this highway on the back roads, where there's nothing but cornfields, we felt almost a weird, quiet stillness in the air. And there was no other cars in sight, and it just felt very ominous. And as we were driving down this highway, I noticed what appeared to be a strange star in the sky. And it was this spear-shaped ball of light. It was like a bluish metallic color, and it was pulsating. And I noticed in the sky, it started to move, and it was coming towards our vehicle. And it got larger and larger as it approached. It began to grow in size. And I looked over at my friend and I said, "Hey, what is that up in the sky?" And he's like, "I have no idea. I thought that was a star. I seen that." And we see this thing and we're kind of panicking because it's coming closer and closer to the vehicle. Now, I'm very meticulous and precise, so I'm always checking the clock and the time. And I looked down at the time. It was 9:16 p.m. And then all of a sudden, it's like I just completely couldn't remember anything. And I found myself driving on the interstate with my friend, and we had gone 20 miles, and now I've gotten onto the interstate going in the other direction. And I can't remember that 20-mile drive, which was pretty rememberable because there was several gas stations and landmarks you would see as you got onto the interstate. And when I proceeded to look at the clock, I noticed it was 12 p.m. And somehow it took us 2.5 hours to drive 20 miles. And I couldn't remember any of that and what had happened from the point when we seen the light. And I look over at my friend, and I didn't even have to say anything because I knew he was thinking the same thing as me. And so I asked him, "Hey, do you remember getting here on the interstate? And do you remember the drive from the point when we seen that light to where we are now? And how it took us 2.5 hours to drive these 20 miles. And he couldn't remember. He said, "I had no idea." He experienced the same exact thing as me. And at this moment, when we were talking about it, we looked over, and off into the distance in a bunch of cornfields were some military-style looking vehicles with these big searchlights looking for something up in the sky. And that made us feel really uneasy, I think, after we had seen that, because all these series of events coincided with one another, and we kind of put two and two together that maybe something really did happen. And the rest of the drive home, we didn't talk to one another. And we didn't talk until about a week after that, when my friend reaches out to me and he says, I contacted someone with the Air Force up in Chicago and told them, we had seen some weird light in the sky, and we were just curious if you were running any test flights or if you had any craft that were flying over in this area. And they grew very angry with him and told him he should not speak about this at all. And so after that, we never really talked about it. And we hadn't talked about it since. But I remember that was the first time, I had always thought that UFOs or extraterrestrials from another planet could exist. But when I experienced that firsthand, it's a whole nother feeling. And I think it verified to me that there is something out there. Now, what's interesting is this wasn't the last time that I had seen these lights. 2 years later, after this, I was at my home in Chicago at the time, and I was home alone. I got this feeling like I was being watched, and I just felt very uncomfortable, and I felt like almost like I wanted to leave the house because it just didn't feel right. And that's when I looked out my window and I seen this same ball of light up in the sky, and it was pulsating and it was moving and doing all these maneuvers sort of back and forth in the sky. And it just gave me this very ominous feeling like, we're watching you. And I just didn't feel comfortable. And I got so uneasy that I actually had to call a friend and have him talk me down because I was so terrified about what had happened. Many years after that, I began talking to my cousin one night about UFOs, and I told him about what had happened to me. And what's interesting is my grandmother, who doesn't believe in UFOs or ghosts or anything like that, she interjects and says, when I was a little girl, I experienced something similar. I was laying in my bedroom at night, and I got a weird feeling, and I was kind of creeped out. And that's when I noticed outside my window this ball of light, and this light proceeded to come down, come up to my window, come through the window inside my room, and just hover above me in my bedroom. And then it went out my window and left. And it was shocking to hear my grandma say that, because she does not believe in anything like that. She's very religious, doesn't talk about that stuff. And so when she says something like that, I believed it, And I think myself, my grandmother, we're one of thousands of people who have encountered these spear-shaped orbs. And we're seeing this all over the world. People are having sightings with these ball-shaped objects that seem to have a level of intelligence, that seem to communicate. And if you look at the majority of UFO sightings, they're not flying disc-shaped saucers. They're not these triangular craft. They tend to be these balls of light, these spears. So you have to speculate, is it possible that these are not unidentified craft that are flying in the sky, but instead these are some sort of biological life form or entity from another part of the universe? Are these extraterrestrial life forms that have evolved past the need of a physical body? Or is this some sort of way of communication from across the universe? And what's interesting is that there's always this ominous dark feeling when people encounter these balls of light. And when you look at ghost hunters, right? A lot of pictures that they take, a lot of experiences they have are with these orbs. When you look at Bigfoot researchers, they will tell you that when they are searching for Bigfoot, when they're doing expeditions, they often encounter these orbs. So what is the connection between all these paranormal entities and these Orbis lights? Why are people seeing them all over the world, and why are people encountering them in which they think they are ghosts, UFOs, and connect it with Bigfoot? What is it that makes them so translucent throughout the world and through the paranormal community? And it's interesting because you talk to a lot of people and they tell you, I've seen a strange light in the sky. They don't say craft, they say light. And it's almost as if they're seeing balls of light, not seeing craft. And when you look at how these UFOs that are seen in the sky, a lot of times by pilots, how they react and how they're able to disappear and almost perform maneuvers that are not possible by any known aircraft, you have to wonder, is this more than just a craft, but an intelligent life form? And we know of biological life that is aerial, that can fly, that can perform maneuvers that airplanes, craft of this, of our technology can actually perform. So it's very interesting that you see so many occurrences of these Orbis lights. Now, it's really, the question I think is that we have to ask: why are they here? What do they want? And who are they? And I'd love to hear your personal thoughts about what you think they may be. If you've had an encounter with these lights, feel free to share your story here in the comments. This is something I think we need to talk more about, because we often talk about UFOs as more so just craft that carry extraterrestrials, but are these lights themselves the extraterrestrials?